So, esports. The viewing figures often quoted for esports are 85% male and 15% female. It is a huge industry with $1 million prizes and all sorts of big shows and flash and jazz and all that sort of nonsense. But what are the barriers that are keeping women out of it? Is it neckbeards? Is it structural inequality? Or is it just that women aren't esports people? What do we think?
It's the same. There are no funny women argument. So there aren't any funny women. Have you ever spoken to more than one woman? Have you? Because you're not finding them because you're not looking. And also, what has been back to the pandemic, been pissing the shit out of me off, is Jacinda Ardern is a stunning, incredible, powerful woman who has just led her country through the worst pandemic in 100 years, and there all opens up again, is a beacon of leadership. And everyone all over the world is going, I wish she was our Prime Minister. Well, wouldn't it be great if we just had her as our Prime Minister? Instead of going, there are millions of Jacinda Arderns in every fucking country, but the reason they aren't in charge is because we have rigged bullshit systems that prop up lunatics, weak, strong men, and people woefully unqualified, which is how you end up with a country of 70 million people with the fifth highest death rate of COVID in the world. Those are the stakes. That's why we need to change the game so that someone like Mandu Reid should be the leader of the bloody country. And then just imagine how awesome that would be. And if you don't know who Mandu Reid is, Google her and follow her and support the shit out of her.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt, there. We are all members of the Women's Equality Party. Excellent use of plugging Mandu Reid's name there. But, back to the whole esports thing. Jem, what do you think? What's your views on what it is that's keeping women out of esports and why they're not taking part in the same numbers as young men, for example?
Well, I think that one of my sort of bugbears about equality is this idea that we need to get more women into this male dominated area or more women into doing that male dominated thing, instead of looking at it and saying, actually, we need to just change the way we view things. So, I think Care is a really good example, actually, and topical from our homeschooled campaign at the weekend. I can do it too. But we look at Care and we say, that care is undervalued, and therefore, we need to get more women into other workplaces and things like that. But no, actually, we need to raise the value of care. We need to recognise that just because it's a classically female role doesn't mean it's not as valuable. And I think that we need to apply the same thing to esports. So when we said we were going to talk about esports today, I was like, I don't really know anything about esports because it focuses on the sorts of games that I do not play. I've never had any interest in them. I just don't enjoy them. So, but then I started thinking, well, could we actually bring in other games? And are we just looking at esports the wrong way? Are esports male dominated because they have traditionally been played by men and therefore choose games that appeal more to the male gamers? And could actually, rather than bringing more women in to play these male-dominated games, could we not just expand the gamut of games available so that it opens it up to a wider audience? I think, so I sort of feel like we can look at it the other way around.
On the WhatsApp, you meant... Sorry, I was just going to say, on the WhatsApp... Sorry, you're waiting for me to speak. Okay, sorry. So on the WhatsApp, Jem, you made a fantastic point about there being, I think...
That's rare.
No. You said something like, it was one of the games you played. I can't remember what it was. It was something like Overcooked or something. If only there was a way to play a game like Overcooked.
Yeah.
And that just blew my mind. Made me think, there's a way to play anything competitively if you're
Of course there is.
if you're like you have to be bold and create these things. But the only reason shooting games and driving games and fighting games are so popular is because it's the men who play them who go, I want to compete in this. But
what you actually suggested was The Sims.
That was it. Yeah.
Like, I really enjoyed that idea of a competition of who can get promoted to the top of a career ladder or find their partner first in The Sims. All that sort of stuff would be great larks.
Agree with that also. There's definitely a lot of games within esports that I've just never even heard of, let alone played. And I think there is a very sort of masculine culture around esports. And I was going to answer your question with another question of my own, which is, do you think that there's a sort of almost a gatekeeping around esports as to who's allowed to compete and who's seen as acceptable as being on a professional esports player?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'm really feeling pumped up about this. I'm sorry I keep on like interrupting and interjecting.
Good.
But fuck, I've forgotten it now.
What was making me think about was the only sport which I'm into, which is snooker, and how the reason that's often cited for why there aren't enough women at the top of the game is women rarely have the luxury of devoting themselves to 18 hours a day practice on what is considered a very niche area, especially when you consider things like the statistical burden of care that tends to fall on women across the spectrum.
But
doesn't that apply to any specialisation, to any sport, and to any?
I would say so,
you know, like if you want,
if you're trying to break into a sport, you also need the money to do that as well. If you're following tournaments around the world, you've got to be able to move around with those tournaments. I don't know if that's the same for esports. I don't know whether that moves around the world. I need to look more into that. But it's definitely something you need to consider if you're wanting to break into something like a sport professionally. You have to be able to go where the competition is.
For example, Zoe Summer, who's a Scottish StarCraft player and part of the British esports women team, has had to move to Korea because that's where the tournaments are and that's where the sponsorship is. There are long hours of work, there's problems with people taking drugs to stay awake and concentrate, but then you look at the money that there is to be made from these competitions, like $10 million being available for winning an International League of Legends tournament, and it's like not surprising that some people do want to do this. I mean, it appeals to me, the idea of winning a shit ton of money for playing games, but it's still not an environment that seems very supportive. I don't know what I asked Matt here, but here's his answer coming up anyway.
I have, yes. And it goes again into the reason why there aren't women gamers, the reason why there aren't so many female politicians, the reason women are left out in so many areas is the system that exists that is built to prop up men and accelerate men through. I'm very proud of this analogy of like straight white men, cisgender men, think they're all really cool warriors going around playing war, but they're playing paintball, and the people like women of color, trans people who are marginalized, they're using real bullets. So that's why that's the stakes are so much different. But the men, because they built the system, they're going, so yeah, we're the best, we're fighting the hardest. And what letting it become an actual meritocracy is it exposes the mediocrity of the vast majority of people who are in positions they have absolutely no qualification to be in, no right to be in. And so it's best to just keep that. Those people don't count. It doesn't matter how good they are, they don't count. We're the best. And that's what this conversation has brought up to me. It's the idea of the mediocrity that just is spread everywhere. And there are so many incredible people like Mandu Reid, I'll bring her up again, that should be, imagine how they would soar if they were in the positions that they should be in.